All right, peace and blessings. Peace and blessings, all praises to the Most High. And this is an update about a story I covered earlier in the year of Hannah Cobb, the white girl who killed Telvin Osbourne, her black boyfriend, and then lied about it. Now, they originally charged her, but soon after, her charges were dismissed. Now, I'm going to play this video about some of the details, and then I'll be back with some more commentary. And this video is fair use for literary and commentary purposes only. Just watch.
It was a case that sparked outrage. A young father shot and killed in his own home, and the woman who admitted to pulling the trigger, his girlfriend. But she wasn't charged with murder. In fact, initially, she wasn't charged at all. Now we have a final update. Hannah Cobb, the Georgia woman at the center of the investigation, will not face any criminal charges for killing 30-year-old Telvin Osbourne. So what changed? And what are police telling the community? You're watching Law and Crime. I'm Kennedy Walker, and I'll walk you through the details. Telvin Osbourne and Hannah Cobb were in a relationship. The couple shared a home in Waynesboro, Georgia, where they were raising 2 young children together. But it would be inside that same home where Telvin's life came to a violent end. The 30-year-old father was shot and killed earlier this year on February 23rd. Police say the shooter was his girlfriend, Hannah Cobb. At first, Cobb told police the shooting was an accident. In a 911 call obtained by WAGT, Cobb can be heard telling the dispatcher she was checking the chamber of her gun when it accidentally went off. She claimed the weapon jammed and she pulled the trigger by mistake. But despite Cobb's claims, the Burke County Sheriff said Telvin's death was not classified as accidental and added that the pair had been drinking that night.
It's just very tragic that he has lost his life in this manner.
Sheriff Williams also said there had been an altercation right before the shooting, one that escalated quickly.
It is reckless to go out and get drunk and then introduce a firearm into an argument. It is reckless to engage in an argument where there's pushing and shoving going on.
Eventually, Cobb was arrested, charged with involuntary manslaughter, but the decision not to charge her with murder sparked immediate backlash. Critics pointed to the changing narrative around whether the shooting was truly accidental and also raised questions about race, as Telvin was black and Cobb is white. In a March hearing, court records began to shed light on the couple's history. Cobb's family described the relationship as chaotic and abusive. New details came to light in the weeks after the shooting, including ring camera footage that showed Cobb telling Osbourne to leave the home. According to court records obtained by Where Is the Buzz, Cobb told investigators that Telvin left, but came back and threatened her with a knife. Telvin reportedly texted Cobb, "You better hide." Investigators say Cobb called Telvin's mother, trying to de-escalate the situation, but things only got worse. Cobb claims Telvin forced his way inside and she ran into the bathroom. She told investigators he kicked in the door, and that's when she fired a single shot. The case was eventually presented to a grand jury, but the panel declined to indict, meaning Hannah Cobb will not face any criminal charges for Telvin Osbourne's death. In the wake of the grand jury's decision and growing backlash, the Burke County Sheriff's Office released a statement addressing the scrutiny and rumors of possible unrest. It reads in part, "It is important to understand that the grand jury is a legal body tasked with hearing all evidence presented in a case before reaching a decision. While we recognize that this outcome may be upsetting or unpopular to some, we strongly urge everyone to refrain from actions that could further harm our community." The Burke County Sheriff's Office remains committed to protecting all citizens and visitors in our county. And joining me to talk more about this is trial attorney Mark Tate. Mark, thank you so much for coming on today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having us.
So let's start here. How often do you see cases like this where a grand jury decides not to indict someone who admits to pulling the trigger?
Well, in all honesty, the ones that we hear about that seem to cause the most controversy are ones where officers are not indicted for attacking people that they're stopping in run-of-the-mill traffic stops, and they hurt them. So that's really where you hear it the most. Very rarely do you see an instance in which a prosecutor has in fact made a presentation to a grand jury where the grand jury has no-billed the case. And so, the old saying used to be a prosecutor can get a ham sandwich indicted. So it's a surprising thing. And of course, that's why we're talking about it here today, because the facts of this case are a little unusual, and it doesn't ring with what we would think would indicate a case that would be no-billed at a grand jury portion.
Right. And let's talk about that more. In your opinion, what made the grand jury decide not to move forward? Was there one detail that potentially tipped the scale in Hannah Cobb's favor?
I think Hannah Cobb, as a 30-year-old lady returning from out clubbing in Augusta, Georgia, which I can't even imagine where you are out in Augusta, Georgia till 2 a.m. I think coming back and claiming to clean your weapon, your sidearm, your handgun, and have it go off accidentally and just accidentally kill your 30-year-old live-in boyfriend. I think that the thing that most explains this is a lucky break, or perhaps a grand jury that just didn't side with the notion that maybe the guy who was killed didn't deserve it somehow. No piece of evidence that I see that could have been presented would exonerate her at the grand jury level. At trial, that's a whole different undertaking. But at the grand jury level, it is only the state allegedly presenting to the grand jury evidence that is sufficient to proceed to trial under an indictment. And they chose here to indict her with really the lightest thing they could when someone's killed with a firearm. Involuntary manslaughter, I believe, was the charge that they sought. So, I agree with you guys. This is an unusual result for this type of set of facts.
If the grand jury had indicted Ms. Cobb, what kind of sentence could we be talking about if she was convicted?
Well, I believe that in the sort of case, depending on what her criminal history was, it could be a life sentence. She would, of course, in Georgia, have an opportunity to apply for parole. Back in my earlier and less jaded days, I worked for the Prisoner Legal Counseling Project. And, back then we would tell somebody with a life sentence, as long as they had a possibility of parole, that the Board of Pardons and Paroles would say about 20 to 21 years is a life sentence, and you can start expecting a serious consideration for parole. By the same token, you never know what the judge issuing a sentence in Burke County is going to say. It seems like it may be okay to hang out in Augusta till 2 a.m. and then shoot your boyfriend. Something to keep note of for boyfriends in Burke County, I suppose. So, at trial, if I was defending defending Cobb, then I'm not sure I would really have her testify. I think that what I would try to do is have the state put on as much evidence or whatever the evidence is. And quite frankly, so long as Cobb is quiet, then there will be very little evidence the state can put on. And so if she's already spoken to the police, if she's already said things that contradict facts that can be certainly shown, she may have a problem.
Yeah, I was saying we know Hannah Cobb initially said the shooting was an accident and then later claimed it was self-defense. Can both of those things be true legally?
Well, I think that I could maybe weave something to say that that can be consistent. That you intended to defend yourself by wielding a firearm to back down an aggressive assailant. I think that's something you could say. And then, I don't know, I accidentally pulled the trigger, or I didn't realize the safety was off, or something like that. And really, I don't think you would, in that kind of argument to a trial jury, I don't think you'd be hoping for an acquittal. I think you'd be trying to hook that one juror, 1 out of 12 people, or maybe 2 out of 12 that said that they just couldn't vote guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And so I think that'd be the approach from Ms. Cobb. And the contradictions that she's made, sometimes you just let them lie, and in closing argument, you tell the jury, listen, there's nothing inconsistent with that. She's scared of this man. He's a 30-year-old man. He's bigger than she is. He's stronger, and she did wield a firearm to try to back him down and scare him. And in the anxiety of the situation, it's not inconsistent to think that gun might go off. And you're just trying to hook one person to say they're not going to convict. And remember, it is the state's burden of proof. And the state does have to show guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And that oftentimes in a case like this seems like, oh, it's a cakewalk. We're going to do that, and it's going to definitely happen. But clearly a grand jury didn't agree. Now, I heard there were people possibly protesting. I think that was reported. There are people who don't like this result. And I would suggest to them, those are your citizens. Those are your neighbors. Those are the ones who heard that evidence. And so I think if the public were really going to try to find some answers, I think the prosecuting attorney who submitted these set of facts to that grand jury, that person's someone I think would be interesting to talk to, because just like a prosecutor could indict even you sitting right here for something, if they don't want an indictment, they know how to spin that too. And I don't know, I probably shouldn't offer these kinds of comments, but I'm very skeptical of this no bill in this case, what the other motivations might have been behind it. And I'm surprised by it. If I were the prosecutor, and this was Chatham County or Fulton County or DeKalb County, I would have presented enough evidence, I believe, to indict this girl. That's just me, and I don't want to libel or slander her at this point. She hasn't done anything. She's not charged with anything. She's presumed innocent. She's presumed innocent even after an indictment. So right now, Ms. Cobb is an innocent lady, and she deserves all of the rights and protections that any of us do who are innocent. And so I'm just saying that a prosecutor, in all likelihood, who wanted to get an indictment probably could. I think there are enough facts to point to there being a question for a jury to decide.
Yeah, I completely understand. And there are some reports that we were reading saying that Miss Cobb in this situation, when they came back home at night, there's reportedly Ring doorbell footage where she's asking Telvin to leave the house. He leaves. She locks him out, allegedly. He comes back. He threatens her. He sends allegedly a threatening text message. He then comes in. She hides in the bathroom, and then he breaks the door down, allegedly from what we were reading. And that's the story that they were going with. And that's when she says the gun went off. They also, reports were saying that Miss Cobb called Telvin's mom, I guess maybe to de-escalate the situation, but she didn't call police. What does that tell you about her mindset at the time?
Well, the first thing it tells me is this is a 25-year-old lady who's not experienced in dealing with situations that might put her in jail. Because the first rule is, if you're suspected of anything, you don't talk. And, if the police are asking you questions, they're not asking you questions so they can find out a reason to not arrest you. They're finding out reasons that they can do things like they did here and bring this thing to a grand jury. So, number one, I think those things are indicative of a problem. I think that if she's now said these things, she needs to quit talking. And I think that if, in fact, she tried to de-escalate and, in fact, Telvin did break back into that house, that raises a lot of questions of when Cobb can use deadly force. Now, I can tell you, if you're sitting in your house in Dallas, Texas, and somebody comes barging through your front door, you in Texas are 100% insulated from criminal liability when you shoot that person. Same in Georgia. We have a thing that we like to call, what is it? The king of the castle or whatever. I think they've nicknamed the rule that if somebody breaks in your house, you can kill them. That may be something that could have helped Cobb here. But, the way we're seeing it is there are a lot of contradictions, and she has an explanation for every single contradiction, just like every single person does for anything they're accused of doing wrong, from spilling the coffee to something like this. So I think the implication here is that she caught a very lucky break not getting indicted and having to defend herself in front of a jury of 12. And I think that you got a DA who's probably not going to represent it. And in the future, I would strongly suggest to her and really anybody else who is dealing with officers, respectfully decline to answer any questions. And you're entitled to a lawyer, and you don't have to give evidence against yourself. And I could go on for another 30, 45 minutes giving a lecture about when not to talk to the police. So I think that's one thing to pick up here. And I know your fans love true crime issues. And the true crime issue is, Murdoch up in South Carolina, a mere 35 miles from us here in Savannah, got convicted because he started talking to the cops. If he had had a friend or had a lawyer right after the issue happened with his wife and child, he might have been able to walk that because he got caught lying, and that really irritates a jury when you can show a defendant's lying. Similar case up in Pennsylvania, a gentleman by the name of Gould did not say a word after his wife went missing, did not speak to the police. He was cooperative and kind and decorous and gentlemanly. He just didn't talk to him. And only now did he get arrested, and there's nothing but circumstantial evidence in that case. So that's a good contrast between when to talk and not to talk.
Well, we touched on this a little bit in the beginning, the fact that some people in the community are upset about the outcome with Ms. Cobb. For people watching this case closely, what do you say to those who feel like justice wasn't served here? And some people are even blaming race.
Yeah, well, obviously, there's an interesting factor. She's 25-year-old white lady, and Telvin was a black guy. And I think that there's a distinction that people draw there, and they frequently think that if a white person, if a white kills a black man, they're going to get treated more favorably if it's a white-on-white crime or a black-on-black crime. And I believe that, Department of Justice statistics actually do bear that out, that similar crimes committed by different races are in fact punished differently. This is Burke County, and the citizens and residents, and I guess at this point, the licensed drivers of Burke County are the ones who decided this outcome with this grand jury. And so the people who are upset by the way this case came down, I think have the ability in the next election to go and vote that district attorney out. And I think that's probably the best protest that you can come up with is, elected officials who don't do the bidding and listen to their constituents need to stay home and go work in private practice. They don't need to represent the public in crimes like this. In terms of are you going to make any headway saying it's a race issue with dealing with race relations in Burke County or state of Georgia? I don't think so. I think that right now in this environment politically, that kind of argument is met with vitriol from the other side. And so no progress is made and more division is created. I would encourage these folks in Burke County to register to vote. And if they're unhappy with this, hold the person who you elected and voted for accountable.
And that makes a lot of sense because we know that's where true change really comes is in the polls. But we've seen these conversations online where people are just asking if Telvin had been the one who pulled the trigger, would this case have ended in the same way? Is that a fair question?
I think it's a very fair question. I think that it's a perfectly legitimate question, and I think it should be. Looked into. We know from the war on drugs back that Nancy Reagan kind of started in the development of the crack problem. We know that black people in the black community who were caught using crack or selling crack in the same quantity as cocaine was used at Studio 54 are serving life sentences, and the people back then, the white people who got caught with cocaine had much lighter sentences, and that was even written into the sentencing rules for people caught with crack. And so we have, unfortunately, demonstrable differences in the way different races have been sentenced, and what kind of time they serve. And I think it's perfectly legitimate to examine and see if, in fact, one group of people accused is treated differently from another group of people. That's one of the, supposed to be one of the touchstones of the criminal justice system in the United States, which is supposed to be the best in the world. And I believe it is. We don't stone people to death. We don't behead people. We don't kill people for being gay. We have a very good criminal justice system. And so if we're going to continue to maintain that level of respect, then I think that, again, in the eyes of the law, everyone is to be treated equally. Justice is blind. We want unbiased people, disinterested people making decisions. And when we erode that, when that comes into question, then people start to doubt the entire criminal justice system.
All right. So I'm going to stop it right there now, because there's a lot of things to unpack. They had that white lawyer, and he was trying his best to be truthful in his assessment of this case. This woman first lied about killing her living boyfriend, the father of her 2 children. Then she made up another story, and they're blaming it on the grand jury that refused to indict her on the charge of involuntary manslaughter, which is the least charge that she could have got. Now, the grand jury is a group of citizens. They're regular, everyday citizens, about 30 or 20, depending on what town you stay in. And this prosecutor brings them the evidence. And the grand jury looks over the evidence and they say, well, no, we're not going to indict that girl on the charge until the case is thrown out. Now, you heard that man say he's trying to gloss over the fact that she should have been indicted. Like he said, if I was the prosecutor and if this happened here, I would have presented enough evidence for her to be indicted, which means that prosecutor in Burke County did not do a good enough job, if a job at all, to present enough evidence to at least get her tried. The guy was like, well, if I was her defense, I could probably weave something together to say it was an accident. And that is, once again, he basically admitted manipulating legal circumstances. He said he is surprised that that lady was not indicted. And further along in the conversation, they finally get to the race component, meaning, black, if a white person killed a black person, they are treated differently, which I'm surprised that he admitted. And, whites are more favorably in the courthouse. And then he admitted, once again, he's a black man, she's a white girl. And, maybe the people in the grand jury might have thought he deserved it. Why would he deserve it? For dating a white girl. And he kept saying things like she caught a lucky break. No, she didn't catch a lucky break. That is how the system works. This lady admittedly shot this man after lying about it and creating a whole narrative. But then he is the violent boyfriend, a volatile relationship, all of those things, which makes her the helpless lily white girl who had to shoot this black man. Now, also, I think it did come out where this guy, Telvin, he had an affinity towards not liking black women. I think there was a couple of Facebook posts that came out where he said he would rather date a dog than a black woman. So, a lot of people, when this first story came out, they didn't have any sympathy for him, which, is understandable, but we can't discount the fact that this could happen to any black man, like we've seen with police shootings, which had nothing to do with dating, but everything to do with race. And so I find it, just surprising. The black girl, she was trying to keep it politically correct. Many people feel that, this is wrong. Well, we just got to vote. We got to vote that prosecutor out. And who was the next racist prosecutor that we are going to vote in? Once again, even though the sheriff is black, and pretty much sure the money that runs these small towns are white. And those are the people who are normally in charge. But I saw this when I was looking up the case of Trinity Polk, who's on trial right now for killing the infant of her black boyfriend, which you're probably going to see that video, or have seen that video, on this channel. But, I had to revisit this because I didn't realize that I knew they had charged her finally, but I didn't realize that the charges had been dismissed. So y'all let me know what y'all think about this video in the comments. Y'all see the number 919-587-7782. Thank y'all for liking, watching, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. And as always, I pray you have peace and blessings.